This is a buyer's guide for a 1990 through 1990, I'd say 7 or 8 Honda Acty. In this case, we're looking at an HH3 model. The second 8 indicates that it's a van. There's also HA models. HA models will be trucks. In many cases, these things are bought at auction, and sometimes they come in and they're pretty beat up. So I figured put basically things to look for when you purchase one of these, so you make sure that you're not getting ripped off. I've seen a number of importers pop up over the last couple years that do some kind of shady stuff, so I want to bring it to everybody's attention. So first things first, make sure it has all of the things that it should come with. So a jack handle, various tools. In this case, this has everything, surprisingly. It's a little dusty in there. And you'll see here in a second that this van probably was on a farm somewhere. But the next thing you want to check on the vans is you want to check the sliders and any of the gaps around the sliders. So you want to look for rust. A lot of these rust up inside the sliders. This one's not really rusty, it's greasy. Someone has greased this, which probably a good thing actually. So something that you will notice on this van is there's all this brushed paint on here. So I've noticed, because a lot of these are bought at auction and it's really hard to see brushed paint at the auction, people will brush on the paint to try and cover rust and missing paint, like right here where it's down to the primer. This is very common on the driver's side, just because as you get in and out, you slide up against it. So same thing with the driver's kick panel over here. It's often missing paint. That's completely normal on these. It stinks, you know. You can sand it down and paint it. The white that comes on these is called taffeta white, and you can actually buy it at most of your parts stores, your local parts stores. I'll give you the paint code for that in a second. So the next thing you want to check is up in the fender wells. You want to look for rust up and around where the strut mount is. I always look inside the truck as well. So for the first couple years that these were legal to bring in, I saw lots of completely rusted through strut towers. This one's dusty, but it's fine. This one is an AC model, and you probably can't see it, but down inside there should be a filter screen. This one is completely gone. Like, the plastic is there, the framing part, but the screen that goes there is gone. So the owner of this van would have to replace that. They're pretty cheap, 14, 15 bucks. I've seen them a little cheaper before too. So that's pretty easy. So tires are good on this particular van. The center caps are all there. The Honda center caps can be hard to find sometimes. This one has them. Another thing to check is your torsion bar bushings. This one's got the Monroe replacements. That's a good sign. That means either this had some shaking to it, or someone was trying to be proactive and tighten up the front end. So that's a good sign if you're buying one that someone else has already worked on. Chances are they won't be imported with upgraded torsion bar bushings. So then we'll come around to the back. Again, you want to check the hinges, or the around where the door is. So in this case, you want to pull on the rubber seals, and you want to make sure that there's no rust. So a lot of times the metal that's underneath this seal will be rusted all the way through. In this case, this one looks great. The seal's a little torn up, but nowhere near as bad as I've seen them. But you want to make sure that that strip of metal is all the way there. There's a little bit of rust down in here, if you can see it. So that's not horrible, but there's definitely some surface rust there. This is all surface rust. All this will sand through, as long as you're not putting like sand off, and you can paint it, as long as you're not putting holes in it when you mess with it. So this is the engine compartment. Usually there's 4 14mm bolts around it. I always pull those before I film, but there's things you want to look for. So here's your AC compressor. You want to make sure there's no obvious leaks. This one's pretty clean. There's your alternator. This one as well, pretty clean. It's a little dusty. This is all grass and dust and such, The Acties, I see them a lot with leaking valve cover gaskets. So these are this is the valve cover here. This gasket will leak. While the vehicle is completely cooled down, put your hand down there and make sure there's no wet oil on the front side just above the header. As long as it's dry, you're in good shape. The valve cover gasket there is a $50 part. It's not a big deal. You want to pull a spark plug wire, all three if you can. Ooh, and see, that one tore. So that's not a great sign. So these have probably never been changed. So this guy's gonna have to get a replacement. But you want to check for moisture. You want to check for oil down at the bottom. If you find oil on the bottom of that, there's a gasket that goes around the inside of the spark plug tube underneath the valve cover. It usually comes in the valve cover set. You want to replace that, because what'll happen is the oil will get down in there, it'll short out the spark plug, and then you'll have a rough idle. Same thing with the distributor. You want to check for oil leaks. There's two O-rings on the inside of the distributor. Then there's a O-ring or a seal on the distributor cap. You want to make sure that there's not oil coming out of either of those areas. If the center O-rings are bad, it will spit oil into the distributor and clog everything up. You'll have a rough condition. So next thing you want to check is you want to check around all the windows for rust. So the Acties are known for the bottom corners to rust like this. I've seen lots and lots of holes. So this one had a hole, and it looks like they painted over it by hand. So this would need to go to a body shop. You'd have to get the window seal, because when you pull the glass, these window seals are trash. So you'd have to get the window seal replaced after the body work is done here. Some sanding down, some body filler, and repainting it to Feta white. Let's see. You want to make sure all the locks work. This particular van, the the door handles don't work in the back, and so I have to kind of open them in a funny way. But this is your paint code here. I believe this is to Feta white, so NH528. So if you go to a paint shop, or even if you go to a local parts store, you can find that paint. So you want to check down here for rust, and make sure these water guards are still in place. If they're not, replace them. Looks like there's some extra visors down here, but again, you want to look for rust on the strut tower. I don't see any on here. Granted, there is quite a bit of hand painted stuff on this van. It kind of stinks, but you know, it is what it is. Something else I should mention is the motor mount. Check the motor mounts. This one's cracked all the way through. This is the passenger side. There's a rear mount directly below this. I have another video how to change these, because it's very common for them to be bad. And then there's the trans mount, or the driver's side mount. By driver's side, I mean the right-hand side of the vehicle, because this is an import. One other thing, take it for a drive. Get it up to about 50 kilometers an hour. If you feel the steering wheel shaking, it's either the center link bushing. You can change the whole center link. It's about $300, or you can do the bushing. It's a press out style. I don't recommend pressing it out. It's a pain. I would just replace the whole link personally, or you change those torsion bar bushings that are located there. These are the upgraded Monroe ones again. So everything looks super clean under here. So I'd say overall this van mechanically is in great shape. The exterior isn't the best. You know, obviously things are painted over and there's some rust, but overall, not bad. And then probably one of the last things I would check is in the back on the passenger side is the airbox. And so you can see the airbox cover right there. You want to make sure it has an airbox cover. A lot of people remove that. It is discontinued by Honda, but if it is not there, you risk getting water in the engine, hydrolocking it. So make sure that cover's there. They do sound sweet with them taken off, I will admit it, but definitely don't want to drive in the rain with it off. You will hydrolock it. So then the last thing, check the roof. So if the roof looks rusty, especially in the gutters back here, you know, you definitely want to avoid rusty gutters. They are very, very hard to get fixed properly. And with that said, going along the rust route here, when you're looking underneath these, A lot of the importers will spray paint underneath to try and cover up rust. This one you can see is missing an undercoating, so chances are they didn't try and cover up rust underneath, only on the outside for auction photos. So those would be my recommendations if you're looking at buying one of these little things. I would avoid these with over, I'd say, 150,000 kilometers. Enjoy them, they're a lot of fun, they're like go-karts. I would definitely put wider wheels and tires on them if you pick one up, just for safety going down the highway, especially with potholes and such. So if you have any questions or comments, comment down below. Let me know what you think. If you can think of anything else to look for, go ahead and put it down below.